Howdy readers, I'm Jason, this is Chapter and Verse, and I'm coming to you today with a tag that was created just this last week by a brand new booktuber named Joey, whose channel is called Game of Authors. I think this was actually the very first video that he put up. I think he actually put this up before his newbie tag even. And I love this idea for a tag. I loved his video. I love the fact that he tagged me in the original video. Hey Blue. And anyway, the tag is called the I love the book, I love the movie tag. And the idea is that you choose 10 pairs. Now, I think Joey wants us to rank them, but I can't do that. I've tried, and I go back and forth, and I don't know quite how much to weigh the book in the equation, how much to weigh the film in the equation. So I'm not going to rank them, but what you're supposed to do is choose 10 pairs of book-film tandems, right? A novel or a book of some other kind of play, and a film that has been adapted from it. And these should be pairs where you really love the book and you really, really love the film. So it didn't really take me that long to come up with the list, but I can't rank them. Now, in almost all cases, I actually saw the film before I read the book. And actually that might be true in all cases. With Angels in America, I had seen the first of the two plays produced on stage before seeing the miniseries and then going on to read the plays. But I think in every other case, I saw the movie before I read the book. Because I was a huge film buff before I became a serious reader. So, and then one more kind of peculiar wrinkle to my version of this tag is that for whatever reason, most of the films, I think 8 out of the 10 films here, have original scores that are so dear to me and that I love so much that when I think of that movie, I actually think of the music before I think of the story or the performances or the visuals, the directing style. With 8 out of 10 of these, the music is just indelible for me. It has almost come to feel like the music was written as much for the books themselves as for the adaptations of the books. So that's interesting. And I have the soundtracks of a number of these as well, so I'm going to show those too. So the first of these is Jude the Obscure by Thomas Hardy, which I actually don't own a copy of. The library is not open yet. Today is the Sunday, and so I don't have a copy to show you. But I saw the film, which is right here on DVD. There we are. Can you see it good? There we go. So the film came out in 1996. I saw this in the theater. So I lived in Cheyenne at the time. And the movie theater there, the Lincoln, had a cinema club where in the spring and in the fall, they would bring in an art film that would have one screening one time a week. And I saw that this was going to be playing, and I didn't really know anything about it. I hadn't read the book. I asked my theater professor that day, knowing I was going to see the movie, I asked my theater professor what he thought of the book, and he said this is the most depressing book written in the English language. And so I said, oh, that's interesting. So I went to see the movie, and I had just recently gotten out of what was for me a very serious relationship. It was a very traumatic breakup, and hey Blue, and I saw it on a snowy winter night. And I was so absolutely struck by it. I can still remember leaving the theater, and I mean downtown was so still, right? It was like 10 o'clock at night on a weeknight, and snow was falling. And I remember standing at the corner waiting to cross the street, and just looking up at one of the light poles, at one of the lamp posts, and watching the snow falling past it, and just thinking of how cold and desolate the movie made me feel. And then a couple of years later, when I was at university, I read the book. And yeah, I would say it's probably the most depressing novel I've ever read. The movie doesn't go quite as far with the tragedy as the novel does. And I think that's to the movie's credit. But anyway, this was directed by Michael Winterbottom. And Blue's playing with his catnip avocado over there. This was directed by Michael Winterbottom, and it stars Christopher Eccleston and Kate Winslet. he's going crazy. And the score, the original score, which I really, really love as well, was written by a composer named Adrian Johnston, who used to be the drummer for a band called the Waterboys. So both the DVD of the film and the soundtrack of the film, to the best of my knowledge, are out of print, which sucks. But I own them both. So the last thing I want to show you for Jude is this. So way back when I was that super huge film buff, I used to buy movie memorabilia on eBay. And I was really obsessed for a while there with what were called trade ads. So essentially, filmmakers, studios would take out these ads in publications like Variety ahead of the Academy Award nominations, trying to convince voters to consider their films in these respective categories. And I saw this this trade ad for Jude, and I had to buy it. And I don't remember how much it cost me. It was probably like $5 or something like that. But anyway, it's framed. It's on our wall in our office above our DVD racks, and I really love this. And by the way, I am of the opinion, it's a minority opinion, but I am of the opinion that Kate Winslet's performance in Jude is her best performance ever, still to this day, after all these years. So the second pairing I wanted to talk about is this one, and this is The Sweet Hereafter by Russell Banks. It's a great book. I've read it a couple of times. It's probably due for a reread. But in this pairing, as was true of Jude and Jude the Obscure as well, I really feel like the film is superior to the book. Now, in all the rest of these cases, I feel like the books and films are on pretty equal footing. But in the case of Jude and The Sweet Hereafter, I think the movie just rises above the source material. The film was directed by Adam Egoyan. It stars Ian Holm. And one of the things I love best about this movie is the score. Like I said, almost all of these films have original scores that are just insanely good. The music was written by Michael Dana, I think is his name. I don't know why it wasn't nominated for the Academy Award for Best Original Score, but that seems to happen a lot with scores that I really love. Jude also was not nominated for Best Original Score. In fact, I think only maybe one of these was nominated for its music. And one of these is a miniseries, so it wasn't eligible for Oscars anyway. But for some reason, I tend to really love film scores that the Academy doesn't tend to value as highly. I'm not sure why that is, but if you've seen The Sweet Hereafter, you know that this is a movie that is stark and snowy and deeply, deeply sad. And it's just wonderfully done, right? It's wonderfully acted. It's beautifully scored. It's beautifully directed. Yeah, this is a tremendous film. So the first one I'm going to share with you here of these remaining 8 are the plays Angels in America. Angels in America Millennium Approaches and Angels in America Perestroika by Tony Kushner, who has gone on to be quite a well-known and well-respected screenwriter. He wrote the screenplay for Spielberg's Lincoln. He has written the screenplay for the remake of West Side Story that Spielberg is currently shooting. But Angels in America are 2 plays that are set in New York City in the 1980s during the AIDS epidemic. And they have so much to say about religion and about fear and about politics. They are heartbreaking plays. They are hilarious plays. And they were turned into an HBO miniseries directed by Mike Nichols and starring Emma Thompson and Meryl Streep and Al Pacino, Jeffrey Wright. There's an actor named, I think his name's Justin Kirk. Let's see. Of course, it doesn't list him on the back because he wasn't famous at the time. But yeah, I think his name's Justin Kirk, and he plays Prior Walter. It's one of the best performances I've ever seen. I still remember when I first showed this miniseries to Kelly, there's one part in it where she was laughing so hard. It is that funny in places. And there are moments in it that make me bawl. And I don't mean just cry, but I mean bawl. I think it's 6 hours long. Most of the major actors in it play multiple roles. If you've never read the Angels in America plays or seen this film, And the music was written by Thomas Newman, right? Again, this is one of the scores that's so damn beautiful. It's so beautiful. I don't have the soundtrack for this. I'm not sure why that is. Thomas Newman will be represented in one other film on this list as well. But yeah, if you haven't read or seen Angels in America, please do make time for it. The next one I will share with you guys is The Remains of the Day, which was written by Kazuo Ishiguro. It is my favorite of the 3 books of his that I've read. Yeah, it's just a gorgeous novel. I read this in grad school, and I remember there was only like 1 or 2 sentences in it that felt wrong to me somehow. They felt tonally misjudged. But apart from those 1 or 2 sentences, it's really a perfect book. This is a 5-star book through and through. And I've never minded the movie cover, in large part because I think that's one of the prettiest pictures of Emma Thompson I've ever seen. And I had quite a crush on Emma Thompson back in the 90s. And then Anthony Hopkins in the film, which is right here, same picture, right? Anthony Hopkins in the film gives what is not only my favorite performance of his, but it's one of my 5 favorite performances of all time. He is extraordinarily good. It's such a nuanced, quiet, inward performance. As good as he is in The Silence of the Lambs, he is, in my opinion, 10 times better in this. This was also, I should note, directed by James Ivory, who is one of my favorite filmmakers of all time, of the team Merchant Ivory. And he also directed A Room with a View, and he directed Howard's End. He also directed a film about Picasso, also starring Anthony Hopkins, called Surviving Picasso, which I had the good fortune of seeing on the big screen as well. I saw this on the big screen. I saw Howard's End when it came out on the big screen. I saw Surviving Picasso on the big screen. I saw one of his last films, The White Countess, on the big screen. James Ivory's still around. He's not directing anymore from what I can see, but he just won the Oscar a couple of years ago, or maybe last year, for adapted screenplay for Call Me By Your Name. That was really nice to see because he had never won an Oscar before that. And he'd been nominated a lot in the past. All right, so the next one is At Play in the Fields of the Lord by Peter Matthiessen. I read this in the year 2000. The film came out, I think, in 1991. I don't have the film to show you because the film has never, believe it or not, been released on DVD or Blu-ray in America, which to this day just pisses me off. I used to own it on VHS, and Kelly and I got rid of it probably 8 years ago or something like that because we didn't have a VCR anymore. So it was like, well, what's the use of keeping it around? I did get to see it probably 4 years ago, again, in its entirety. Somebody had somehow uploaded the entire film on YouTube, and it was good quality, and it was, and, it looked just fine. And I was able to see it again before that video got taken down. I don't know why this has never been released on DVD in America. However, I did some research yesterday, and if you're wanting to see At Play in the Fields of the Lord, it was directed by Hector Babenco, who made Kiss the Spider-Woman. It stars Tom Berenger, Tom Waits, Daryl Hannah, Aidan Quinn, John Lithgow, Kathy Bates. It is on Redbox right now. You can rent it on Redbox, or you can actually buy it digitally on Redbox. I don't know how long that will last. I don't know how renting things through Redbox online works, but if you want to see the film, that's the only way you can see it here in the States right now, unless your library happens to have some kind of weird bootleg copy of it. And the soundtrack is right here. And the music for the film was composed by, I'm going to get his name completely wrong, but Zbigniew Preisner. And he's the one who wrote the music for Krzysztof Kieślowski's Blue, which I recently did a video on here on my channel. So, At Play in the Fields of the Lord by Peter Matthiessen. All right, next up is The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford. The novel's by Ron Hansen. The novel was, I believe, a finalist for the PEN/Faulkner Award. It's brilliant. We read this in our book club some years back. And probably, 8 months before I read the novel, I got to see the film on the big screen in Missoula. I was probably one of, I don't know, 150 people in America who saw the movie on the big screen. It was a box office failure, to say the least. It made no money. Brad Pitt is of the opinion that it's the best work he's ever done. I would agree with him. But yeah, this is one of the best films of the 21st century, in my opinion. It's absolutely wonderful. And the score was written by Nick Cave of Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds and Warren Ellis. And Nick Cave actually has a little cameo as this kind of strumming guitar player in a saloon in the film. He's in a scene near the end of the movie. But yeah, if you haven't read or seen The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, you should, especially if you're a Terrence Malick fan. The director of the film, Andrew Dominik, kind of a Malick devotee, and his style is very, very much influenced by Terrence Malick. So if you're a Malick fan, odds are you're gonna really, really love that movie. And here is The Grapes of Wrath, right? I've showed this book many times on my channel. I reread it last year. It's one of my favorite novels of all time by John Steinbeck. This is our folio edition of it. And the film was directed by the late, great John Ford. It stars Henry Fonda. It was nominated for Best Picture at the Oscars. It did not win. I don't know why it didn't win. But I think John Ford won Best Director for it. And John Ford is just one of my favorite filmmakers. He's absolutely freaking brilliant. He's completely underrated. People, when they talk about John Ford, they talk about the greatness of The Searchers. I actually think The Searchers is one of his weaker movies. I've never really understood the cult following around that movie. But yeah, my favorites of his are The Grapes of Wrath and My Darling Clementine. I really love Drums Along the Mohawk as well. It's out of print right now. And again, I have no freaking idea why these things go out of print. They're classics. They should always be around. Anyhow, yeah, The Grapes of Wrath, there's not really a whole lot about that needs to be said. Here's a photo of me and Kelly at a screening of The Grapes of Wrath. They had a little photo booth where people could put on hats and such from the time period. We went to this screening. This was in late 2007 or early 2008 up in Missoula. And it was somehow tied to, I don't know, maybe the American Studies department at the university. I can't remember exactly. But yeah, I thought that you guys would like to see this old picture of us. So now we've got The Last Temptation of Christ by Nikos Kazantzakis. I've talked about this book before. It's one of the most important novels in my life. It was a formative novel in my faith. I will try and link to the video from my backlist where I talk at length about why this book is important to me. And the film was directed by Martin Scorsese. I think The Last Temptation of Christ is his first or second best film. I really love this and Raging Bull just about equally. But in case you don't know, right, in case you weren't born yet or maybe you were living under a rock, this was an incredibly controversial film. There were protests, there were theaters that were picketed. Martin Scorsese himself received death threats. Theaters were receiving bomb threats. Odds are the people who were really freaking out about it hadn't watched the film or read the book, because I find the film really quite beautiful and really reverential. I don't think there's anything dangerous about exploring the idea that Jesus was a man, because Jesus was a man. So religious fundamentalists, though, were freaking up in arms when this came out. I think it's freaking genius. And its film score, strangely enough, was composed by none other than Peter Gabriel. And yes, I mean that Peter Gabriel. Sledgehammer Peter Gabriel. The next one is Oscar and Lucinda, the novel by Peter Carey. This is the one with the movie cover. We have 3 editions of this book, showing this one just because it's the movie cover. I've read it 7 times. I've talked about it at length on this channel. Peter Carey is, in my opinion, the greatest living novelist in the world, and I think this is his greatest book. The film was directed by Gillian Armstrong. She also directed the 1994 adaptation of Little Women, which is another one of my favorite movies. This was the first film that had Cate Blanchett in it. The trailer for the movie actually says that. It says, "And introducing Cate Blanchett." as Lucinda. And just as with Kate Winslet in Jude, I think this is Cate Blanchett's best performance. The film came out in 1997, and I don't think anything that she has done since matches this. But yeah, very, very few people have seen this. I think the DVD is out of print, unfortunately. It is not on Redbox. The soundtrack is right here, composed by Thomas Newman. He's the guy who did the music for Angels in America. He also wrote the music for The Horse Whisperer and Armstrong's Little Women, which I just mentioned. So back in the day, when I was buying the movie memorabilia, like the Jude trade ad that I showed you, I also bought the movie trailer for Oscar and Lucinda on celluloid. And yeah, this is it. I've never watched it. Unfortunately, I don't know anybody with a projector capable of screening this, and it's probably actually too brittle anymore. But anyway, so I bought the trailer for the film, and I also bought a press kit for Oscar and Lucinda that has in it, among other things, these beautiful black and white glossy photos from the production. And yeah, let's see, that one there. But anyway, yeah, I was pretty obsessed with Oscar and Lucinda back in the day. And then the last one that I'm going to share with you guys, Roz will be probably unhappy about this because I know she doesn't like the book at all, is Milan Kundera's The Unbearable Lightness of Being. This is a novel I have read twice. More than any other book that I've read multiple times, this thing revealed itself to me to be a completely different novel the second time I read it. I loved it both times, but it was crazy. Reading it the second time, where I was in my life, what I was bringing to the novel that time, it was like a completely different book. 100% different novel. It was weird and wonderful. And the film was directed by Philip Kaufman, and I have the old out-of-print Criterion Collection edition of it. And it stars Juliette Binoche and Lena Olin and the great Daniel Day-Lewis, who has since retired, and one hopes that he will reconsider that because he is probably the greatest actor in the world. This is a movie that I love more every time I see it. Every time I see it, it climbs further up in my top 100 films of all time. The last time I compiled that list, this was like number 5 or 6 in my top 100 films of all time. It's as good an adaptation of that novel, which is really just a novel of ideas more than anything else. It is as good an adaptation as could possibly be done of that book. So that's it. I realize this was long, but I really love talking about movies, and I don't do it as often as I'd like on my channel. So if you've seen any of these, if you've read any of these books or seen any of these films, please let me know what you think in the comments below. And before I let you go, I would like to tag a few people. So I would like to tag Steve Donahue, who has famously or infamously said in the past that he thinks most literary adaptations are actually better than the books that they're based on. So I'd like him to do this tag. And Ryan from Seeking Stories, and Lucy Rutherford, an Australian booktuber who is a big film buff as well. I think that would be great to see all of their responses. I hope you guys had a great weekend, and I will talk to you again very soon. Adios.